perception in there. Hey, everybody, and welcome to our Real Talk on Real Estate. We're live, and I want to talk to you guys about what people's perception is the hardest part of real estate, and that's financing. And that's most people's perception is that the hardest part is financing itself. Now, the truth to that is that it is the hardest part if and only if you don't know the process that banks utilize to vet projects and lend money. And so today we're going to talk to you guys about how to get construction financing in 2024. And I'm going to relate this both to residential and commercial lending, because I know that the vast majority of people, as they enter into the real estate market, are in the residential sector. But I also know that the vast majority of people that follow our content want to and are already migrating into the commercial sector. And so I want to relate it to both sectors. Okay. Now, truth be told, this is the process that banks utilize, and it's not as hard as you think it is if you know the ins and outs of what banks are looking for. Here's the biggest problem is that most people go in wanting to get financing and they go to the bank without a project. And 100% of the time, a bank's going to tell you no. Because if you have like this arbitrage project that doesn't exist, you don't even have a piece of land, you don't have some architecture, you have nothing, then the bank's going to tell you no. Or if you go find a project that somebody happens to tell you is permit ready, which PS, by the way, 99% of the time, it is not permit ready. It is maybe entitled or partially entitled, but it's not to the finish line. You got to be permit ready. You got to have a general contractor. You got to have all the architecture, all of the engineering from all trade professionals. You got to have a lot of different stuff, especially on the commercial end. Now, for residential, permit ready is completely different, a lot simpler, a lot more streamlined, and a lot less moving pieces to it. Okay, so let's start with construction financing and the misconception that most people have with construction financing. Now, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about one of the biggest limitations that people have, and it's their brain, because we weren't taught about lending in school, especially not commercial lending. We might understand what traditional conforming loans are because that's how you get a mortgage on a house. And so for those of you guys that own a house, you've went through the process, right? For those of you guys that own more than one house, you've been through the process more than once. For those of you guys that done fix and flips or bought and sold, maybe exercised the burst strategy, own some Airbnbs, whatever it is, you guys have experienced conforming lending. Okay, so that's when you go to the bank, you have an 80% you have a loan to value ratio where you go in and say, okay, this is an investment property. This is what the value is. And the bank's going to give you 80% loan to value. Okay. With conforming lending, they also look at your debt to income ratio, and they're usually looking at a 50% debt to income ratio. They don't look at that stuff on commercial lending. Now, there are stuff that they look at, and I'm going to talk about that here. But what I really want you guys to understand is the process that it takes to get lending on a residential and commercial sector, but both being investment lending, right? They're both for investment purposes. Now, what you have to do is here's the first do nots, okay? Do not apply for a loan until you have a real project. You have to have a real project, okay? Let me give you an example. Right now, guys, I have two massive projects coming out of the ground and a third one that's following weeks behind it, and then another massive one that's coming out of the ground at the beginning of the year. The ones that we have right now, my West Camelback project and my Rio Rancho project, my Inca 150, both of those projects, guys, the project that I have on West Camelback, I purchased that in August 2 years ago. So we're in August already now. Now, we picked up that land 2 years ago, this coming August, which we're in August today, right? So 2 years ago, okay? I hadn't even talked to a lender until just a couple months ago. I tied up the land, didn't buy the land, I tied up the land. And this is the process, guys. And then I went in and I created a real project. Didn't even have a general contractor selected yet, didn't have anything. And I didn't worry about lending. And I knew that the market was shifting. So we were shedding off value because interest rates were going up. And yet I still didn't go in and I didn't worry about retaining a loan. Now, my Rio Rancho project, same thing. I've owned this land since 2008. And we started working on entitlements last October, so not even a year ago, and we started working through the process. It wasn't until 60 days ago that I actually sat down and submitted my stuff to a lender. And even today, because we're still just a couple weeks away from finishing our offsite civil engineering, the banks are in a halt state until we actually deliver to them the civil engineering. Now, we're 90% sure that we're going to get approved on it, provided that when the civil engineering comes back, now they can actually send that project out for an appraisal. But the banks will not even give you an entire yes, guys, until you have a full set of drawings that they can actually onboard and hire an appraiser. Hand them over the drawings and say, hey, can you appraise this and tell us, the bank, what this property is valued at? Because if you just sit back and you have a guy in a suit and a tie sit in a bank, you're like, hi, Jerome, I'm going to get a loan today. And you go back to this guy and say, okay, can you help me out with this loan? Hey, I need $40 million. You think you say, okay, Jerome, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get you that loan today because I like you. Because I like you. No, you're not going to go in and get a loan. My wife and them were laughing at me because I'll make it some. So one of the big things is they're not just going to go in and give you a loan because they like you. They need to see a real project. And so whole point being is that you need to have something tangible that they can send out to an appraiser. They don't even know what that project is valued at yet. Okay. Now you should know this because one of the big things that happens is that the banks will not go in and take that project on until they know that that project has value. Now, what you need to do is you need to get comps before you even get started on the project. And you just say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. You pencil out everything that project's going to exist with, right? And then you go in to talk to the commercial brokers and you talk to the property management companies, provided that you're doing a commercial project, and you ask them, okay, what are rents performing at in this market? Now, when we typically do this is in the first 30 days that we tie up the project, and a lot of times before we even tie up the project, because we want to make sure that during our due diligence period, we're going in and we're getting numbers that are really existing in that market. For residential, it's easy. We get a residential broker that's dominant in that market, okay? Not your brother, sister, not your cousin that just got a real estate license, not your friend who's a firefighter that's struggling because they need commissions and they just got their real estate license. You don't onboard any of those people. The people that you actually onboard are the real estate professionals that are dominant in that area. So on residential properties, what I do is I go into those areas and I actually just drive around the exact area that I'm interested in buying in, that I know I want to be able to build in, develop in, because it fits my business model. And then when I see the presence of a real estate broker sign multiple times, not once, but then I drive down the street and then I see their sign again for another listing. And then I see it again for another listing within a mile or so odd radius. I know that broker probably lives in that area, but more importantly, they actually specialize in that area because they're dominant in that area. So I'll reach out to them and I'll ask them to get me the comps in that area that support what I'm going to do. That way I have affirmation before I tie up the land that that's going to be a good area, that I have supporting documentation that what I'm doing has the square footage and the price that I need to make a return on my investment, to make a profit. Okay. Now, what the commercial brokers and the property management companies do is they're the ones that have all the data. They're the ones that are selling the deals. They're the ones that are taking in the deals. They're the ones that are finding buyers and retaining buyers for these deals, most of which are off-market buyers because they have relationships, especially the good brokers. And then the property management companies, they have the data because they're the ones managing the properties in that area. So they know what's needed as far as what bedroom mixes need to be in there, more 1 bedrooms, more 2 bedrooms, more 3 bedrooms, more studios, depending on what that market is. They know what those rent rates are. They know what the RUBS, the rental upgrades are in that area. And they know what the maximum amount of rent you're going to be able to retain once that property is built is because they have physical data. It's not like some person saying, I think we need more 1-bedrooms, or I think we need more 2-bedrooms. No, they have data supporting that there's no more 2-bedrooms in that market, and they need more 2-bedrooms. And there's X amount of 1-bedrooms, and there's a lot of studios, meaning don't build studios. There's a lot of them. You could build some 1-bedrooms, but we really need 2-bedrooms in these areas. So that tells you what you need as far as data based on the pro formas and the actual physical living, breathing need based on numbers, guys, based on real life data. Now, you don't reinvent the wheel. You just go in and do and duplicate what the professionals tell you are needed in that area because they know the areas, guys. Now, so most people say, well, Jerome, I go and invest in a piece of land, or I go and invest in architecture and engineering without even knowing if I have a project that I'm going to be able to make money on. No, you know, because I'm telling you the recipe right now on how to get financing. You need to have supporting information to back it. Okay. This is done during your due diligence period. Now, once you do that, guys, and you know that you're going to move forward on this, sometimes even before I actually tie up the land, now I have all that supporting documentation. Now I go in, I just tie up my land. A lot of times I don't even buy the land. I just go and tie it up. I put my escrow money in. I ask for another 60 days worth of due diligence and maybe another 60 days worth of closing time. So I have 120 days on commercial property. If it's residential, I'll ask for 30 days worth of due diligence and a 60-day close. So I have at least 60 days to be able to close on that property. Now, once I have that and I have the property tied up, now I control it legally. Okay. I have escrow money in at the title company or with my escrow attorney. I have control of the property. Now I can safely go out and start executing. And I'm talking immediately execute. Okay. Now, not one time have I talked about a bank, ladies and gentlemen. Just know that. I haven't talked about a bank, not even once thus far. Okay. I am giving you the step-by-step process. Now let's go over 6 steps that you need to take care of before you actually get in here. Okay. Now, so number 1 is do not apply until you have a real project. That's step number 1. Step number 2, you have to tie up the lot. Okay. So now I won't go invest money in a lot unless I control it. Okay. You don't have to own it, but you need to control it, because are you going to go pay for a survey? Are you going to go pay for an architect? Are you going to pay for engineers if you don't control that asset? What happens if they land up finding a better buyer and they land up tying it up with somebody else? All of your due diligence is going to be money flushed down the drain. Now, have we done that before on big, scary projects that we know aren't going anyplace? Yes, we do. But the vast majority for residential single-family lots, don't invest capital in that project until you actually control the lot. On small commercial projects, don't invest any money in that project until you control the lot. Okay, so you can either control it through the means of owner financing, or you can control it based on a contractual agreement to purchase that lot with terms and conditions. Right now, that's a whole other video. I'll recommend a video that you can watch after this that actually gives you some of those terms and conditions in negotiations in our Elite Real Estate Society, where I explain all of that. Okay, now, which is also on YouTube. P.S. By the way, if you like this content, want more like it, smash that thumbs up button and then click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, number 3, ladies and gentlemen, you need to get a survey. Okay. Now, a lot of times, most lots have a survey already retained on them. And typically, this is just a boundary survey. It's nothing extensive. It's just a boundary survey that marks the lay of the land. And initially, that's the most important piece that you need, because once you have the actual boundary survey, you could take that to an architect. What I use, and this is just a little resource tip, so that way I can go out and start immediately and I don't waste time, because sometimes surveys take 2 weeks or longer to get back, just a simple boundary survey. So instead of wasting 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of my due diligence period, I use an app called Land Glide. Okay. I take this app called Land Glide, and this is what Land Glide looks like. I'll show it to you guys. And it's cool. You can go anywhere in the country, and you could be standing there, and because it runs on satellites, it'll show you exactly where you are. Okay. So it's called Land Glide. And oops, let me go back and I'll show you what Land Glide looks like. Okay, that's what Land Glide looks like. It's like, okay. So it's Land Glide, and it shows you exactly where I'm at. I'm here on the peninsula over here in Mexico. And that little blue dot right there, is actually me sitting there. Now, when you're sitting on any given lot, or you can just punch in the legal description, you can punch in the address, you can punch in anything, and it'll give you the exact layout. So like, let me give you an example. Let's say, let me put in just a random address. Okay. Okay. So you could go out, and here's just a typical lot. Okay. You go out on this typical lot, and it's outlined, guys. This lot is outlined on LandGlide. You can go in and you could hit the dimensions, and it'll actually track your distance, and you can actually measure the lot. You just click on the corners, and you can get that survey. You can just do a screenshot on it, and then you just email that over to your architect immediately. And that fast, you have a survey that works for the architect to get started with. Now they can take the acreage of that land, they can take the layout of that land, and they can immediately start the process of architecture. Now they can work on the density. Like if it's a single family home, it's easy. Now they just have to plat the lot, plat the house on the lot, and then they do the setback requirements based on like HOAs, or both based on municipal requirements on what the setbacks are from the lot lines, and they can actually maximize what you can do on that land. Now, you're going to build exactly what's being built and is being sold actively in that market. The architect can start platting that house, and you can give them instructions that the broker already gave you, so you can just start putting that plat together immediately. Okay, now you're buying time, and when you buy time, you save money. Okay, now that is step number 3. So we get the survey. Number 4 is we onboard our architect. Okay, now the architect goes to work. Number 5, we need to hire our engineers. For residential, that's as simple as a civil engineer who does what's called your grading and drainage plan. Most municipalities nowadays are requiring civil engineering to get permits. Not required in all municipalities, but a grading and drainage plan is a great thing to get because they're simple, they're very inexpensive. For about $2,500, maybe $3,000 at the most, you can protect yourself liability-wise, where the civil engineer actually stamps, signs, approves the grade and drainage plan. And as long as you build a house to that grade and drainage plan, it puts the liability on the engineer, takes it off of you. So that way you don't have to worry about the house flooding or any type of punitive damages due to water, infill, so forth and so on. So we land up going in and we retain a civil engineer for a modest price. And then the other engineer that you may want on board for residential is maybe a structural engineer. Now, structural engineer is real easy because CAD in every municipality actually does a bracing plan for you, and it does the structural engineering calls outs for the International Building Code right off the CAD. So the structural engineer does nothing more than review, confirm, stamp, sign, and send back to you. So typically I pay about $500 for a structural engineer. Sometimes they're a little bit more if there's a little bit more requirements, like in the state of California, for sake of example. Okay. But those would be the only 2 engineers that you would do. Now, I am doing all of this, guys, while the lot's tied up predominantly. Now, if it's a screaming deal and I don't want to wait to lose that lot at all, and I'm required to buy it so that I don't lose it because the seller says you either close or we sell it to someone else, that's the only time. And it has to be a precious lot in order for me to do that. Otherwise, I just take my sweet time. I go in. When I say take my sweet time, I take my sweet time trying to close. But I go in sprinting through all of the line items I'm going through here so I can get to the actual finish line. Of what I need to send to the appraisers so I can get my actual construction loan and my money, right? Now, look, guys, we are on item number 5, and I still haven't even talked about lending yet. Still haven't even mentioned lending, okay? Now, step number 6 is that you don't apply for construction financing until you're ready to get your permits, okay? The second you have a full set of drawings, now you could start flirting with financing after step number 5, where you start talking to like 5 or 6 different lenders, and never, ever rely on one lender, guys. Never rely on one lender, okay? And I'll tell you, the best lending for residential is going to be your community and local banks and your credit unions, your local credit unions. They love projects that are in your area and that are hometown projects. Even for commercial lending, that are small commercial lending, those are the ones to go do an outreach out to first. Now, if you don't have those relationships, then you can go to larger institutional lenders, some of the affiliates that we have and we onboard, so that we have resources and tools for you guys to be able to take advantage of lending through vetted and through good commercial lenders. But initially, relationships win in lending, especially residential lending. So never discredit relationships and small community banks and small credit unions. Okay. Now, so step number 6, let's continue here because we're almost done, guys. Now, once you go in, what you can do once you get through step number 5 is now you have a tangible set of drawings. Now you can send your project out to bid while you're waiting for financing and for permits. And this is where we go to the market for contractors. This is where we go to the market for subcontractors. Now we're starting to get our budget together. Now you're starting to go in and entertain the financial institution's requirement, because the financial institution wants to know what's the budget to build this project. Well, you're not going to get lending unless you have a budget put together. So if you have a general contractor, this is where you onboard your general contractor, and you still haven't even finished lending. You're still not even pushing them to give you a yes or a no yet, because now you're still doing the due diligence requirements that you need to get construction lending. Okay, you've already know that the project's viable based on comps and pro formas that you got for both your commercial or residential project. But now you have to put the working pieces together. So step number 6 is you putting the working pieces together so that you can go out and apply for your construction loan. But you're going to need a budget, and the budget's going to come from your contractor or from your subcontractors that either you put together or the general contractor puts together on your behalf. And then you take that construction budget to the lender. We have the forms that have all the step-by-step sequential order of the build and every price that you need to make sure that you're taking advantage of. And for those of you guys that aren't working with us in our inner circle, those forms and those PDFs, they're absolutely priceless, guys. They're the same forms that we still use today for both residential and commercial lending, and they're absolutely priceless. Now, with that said, we go in, and now after step number 6, we go in and we sit down with the bankers. We have our finished construction drawings. Now, what they do with those is they send those out to go get an appraisal. And that appraisal comes back, and the appraiser is looking at the exact same multiple listing data for residential that you yourself went out to vet the project. So they're going to give the same data that you went out and retained for yourself now to the bank and put a comp together that says, hey, this is a viable project. They're asking for $500,000 worth of construction money. The house will sell for $850,000, give or take. And so now you know that you have the ability to build that project. Now, you don't, if the house selling for $850,000, that the difference of the variable is your profit, guys. You don't need to have the hundreds of thousands of dollars. All you need is the money that you need to do the survey, the architecture, the engineering, and the deposit on the lot, because your first draw from the bank is going to be to pay for the land. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not conforming lending. I know you weren't taught this in school. I know that I'm going up against 13,000 hours of a jacked up education system that doesn't teach you anything about commercial lending. I know that. So for more content to understand the full in-depth process that I just talked about today, click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Pound that thumbs up button and continue watching through every single one of my videos to learn, execute, and continue crushing profits in both the single family ground up game and in the multifamily ground up game. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys. Good night. God bless. And I can't wait to see you guys for more Real Talk on Real Estate, more information. You guys go out there and keep compounding your success.